Two, one. Great. And I'm recording. So today I'm with Anna Stone. We're going to be talking about Good Dollar maybe later on. But today, Anna, thanks for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me here, Sonny. It's been so fun getting to know you over the past few months.
Yeah, it has been. I guess we were just talking about Perrier, my newfound addiction, this fizzy water stuff. So you said you've been a fan of it?
Yeah, my mom is a fan, and I have to say, I feel like it's a very Manhattan thing, Perrier, or at one point it was. And as a New Yorker, I was into it from an early age. Who turned you on to it?
Do you know what intermittent fasting is? Have you heard
Yeah,
of
I
that?
do.
So
I do.
I
I'm a
started.
recovering intermittent faster.
You're recovering. Okay. So you stopped it for certain
I did.
reasons. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So maybe for another episode we'll have to save that conversation. But I would be interested in knowing. But yeah, I've been doing it for a couple of years, and yeah, I think black coffee, water, things like that, and sparkling water, they don't break your fast. So I've been introducing it as a part of pretending my body that I'm going to be full for maybe a little bit longer until I start eating again.
So let's just get this straight for the audience. How
Please.
many hours of fast are you doing this podcast on?
Oh, right now, as of this moment, I have not eaten for, I don't know. Let's see if I had to do the math on it. What time is it? Ooh, I don't know, 16 hours?
You're approaching the end of the cycle, right?
Yeah, it's called intermittent fasting, but for me, it's really just skipping breakfast. It's like a fancy way of saying skipping breakfast, no? And not activating your metabolism. Anyways, I digress. So Anna, the conversation today is really about, first of all, I start with where do we meet? So I think we were connected through, what was it, through Twitter, maybe? Twitter DM recently? Or no, maybe it was through eToro
No,
or Good
it was
Dollar.
through two connections. One was directly through Yoni, who you've known for a long time. And then
Right.
the second was actually through your friend, I think Lior. Is that his
Right,
name?
right. There you go. Okay, Leor's
Yeah,
one of,
great.
yeah, I've known Leor for a long time. And then yeah, funny enough, you mentioned, so a lot of people don't know, but the founder of like Good Dollar is also the founder of eToro, right?
Yeah.
Yanni and Yanni is also, if I'm not mistaken, his name is on the white paper for color coins, which is like way back. And if people remember that, but it was essentially a predecessor to the idea of Ethereum being able to do cool things on top of Bitcoin. I love Yanni. He's a great guy.
Yeah, fully. All of what you just said is correct. So
Mm,
Yoni is the founder and CEO of eToro, which is a huge the world's largest social trading platform with I think over 20 million users, people trading socially, following professional traders, learning the tricks of the trade from pros and the best in the business. I would say Yoni also is an early, we'll talk about Good Dollar later, but this is an idea that he's been thinking about since I'd say 2008. So it's an early believer in UBI and universal basic income and thinking about creative ways to do wealth distribution. And you also mentioned that he was one of the original authors on colored coins, which is also true. And I'll tell you, I'm based in Tel Aviv. I've been working in the crypto community here for a number of years. And one of the most famous urban legends of the crypto community in Israel is that Vitalik Buterin wrote the Ethereum white paper while sitting in Yoni Asia's office.
cool. Cool. I actually, and if my memory serves correctly, had a message from Yanni back in 2012 saying, just hinting towards the idea of maybe doing some sort of rupee or some sort of fiat on the blockchain, on the Bitcoin blockchain. And then, anyways, so big fan. And eToro is obviously an amazing company, and I'd love to have Yanni on here. I should ping him about it and to talk about that. But today we're going to talk about. I don't want to put the cart before the horse here, but one of the main kind of topics is going to be Good Dollar, which, like you said, is universal basic income. But it's important to note, I think, a free market based solution. So this isn't
Right.
trying to, because I think the knee jerk reaction, because I've been interviewing a lot of people, and as I mentioned to you, I ask about UBI to Bitcoiners like almost every
Yeah.
day. And it is something that most people look at as no. If you believe in universal basic income, you don't believe in Bitcoin. That is flat out like tweets, quote for quote. So I like to call out pink elephants right off the bat. And so I do think fundamentally why I'm against the regular way of universal basic income is because it essentially debases the currency and steals from certain people and gives it to the other. And it doesn't jive with free market kind of economics. And so I like the fact that Yoni is going, look, there is this existing problem and growing problem of people not having a source of income. And is there a way that the free market can come up with using the tools that we have at our disposal with Bitcoin and Ethereum and blockchain and ERC20? Can we solve these problems at scale? And the way I came across this project was actually a year and a half ago. I was in France at the was it the OECD blockchain event or something? And Yanni was, I think, the keynote or one of the main people there that spoke about it to a room full of, I don't know, 2,000 regulators and or something. And I was just like blown away that somebody of his stature was trying to take a stab at this, what I consider to be a grand challenge, a grand of our time. Okay. Wow. A lot of stuff I said.
Lot of stuff to unpack there.
We're going to do that. Maybe I'll leave that as a teaser. First, let's start with you. So what's your story? And we're going to, obviously have, so what is your story? Where does it begin?
Okay, great. Wow,
yeah.
I'm excited to get into it. I really am. Okay. I actually, my motivation, what brought me to crypto was actually coming from a very naive position as a young person growing up in New York City, riding the subway and being exposed to inequality, taking the subway to school and being exposed to inequality. And that, I would say, drove my intellectual and academic interest in both public policy, but also economics. And so when I was deciding what to study, that's what I was naturally drawn to. That was my predilection. And after leaving school, after studying economics and politics, I started to work in the impact space. I started to work at the Clinton Foundation, Save the Children, working in economic development programming. It wasn't too long after I was in the NGO space that I began to realize that, okay, if we're serious about solving problems such as income inequality or economic development, no amount of excellent programming that we're going to do here is ever going to solve these things on a macro scale. Those organizations organize great programs, but not what we would think about systemic change, what we now call systemic change. And so, long story short, I was studying at the Fletcher School in Tufts, which is focused off of global political economy. I went back to get my master's. And it was at this point in time that you remember the BRICS? when everyone was talking about the BRICS and the business at the bottom of the pyramid and the emerging markets. And this is right when I would say social investing and social impact was becoming a term around 2012. And I was just in love with this idea that you could be a business that's providing value add services to low income people who are otherwise underserved. And you could do this in a model where you're doing good and making money. And I just fell in love with this idea of the double bottom line return. Long story short, I moved to Tel Aviv with a desire to work in technology soon after that. And I just proceeded on. I didn't find any impact work here. Impact investing was a very nascent industry. There was no opportunities here. I went to work in tech. I went to learn about how to create and sell disruptive technologies, and spent most of my career in enterprise tech and big data and AI. Israel is an amazing technology scene, lots of startups, lots of brilliant founders. So there was lots of interesting work to be done until around 2017, when I was in the midst of a career shift and I started to hear about crypto because I was paying attention. And so it was one of these things that I didn't invest, but I started to learn and I started to read. And I started to also, I would say, really fall in love with the narrative of Bitcoin, which at that point in time was all about the power of decentralization and one human, one wallet, the ability to distribute money and wealth at scale, right? All of these different narratives, and financial inclusion at that point in time was a key theme. Turned out it wasn't so easy to do, which is more of what we'll get into today. Just using blockchain, using crypto, it's not like financial inclusion will happen. But long story short, that's what drove me into crypto. I had the opportunity to join the team at the Bancor protocol, which was one of the first projects developing new token and token tools on Ethereum before decentralized finance was DeFi. And after learning a lot there and working on a number of different models, some focused on developers, some focused also on impact implementations. Bancor was running an amazing community currency initiative in Kenya in partnership with grassroots economics. I realized that for me, my mission in life was to work in this space, but purely in the impact space. I didn't want to sell new financial instruments to people who already knew were highly technical and highly financial. I really wanted to work at the cutting edge of how do we start to bring some of these enabling solutions that are to people that are so underserved by our existing conventional financial system. When I had the opportunity to join Yoni and the team at GoodDollar, which was focused off of, okay, how do we actually solve for this problem of income inequality, specifically within the space of crypto, which we're starting to see has a huge amount of potential to create wealth, but is still highly concentrated in the hands of very wealthy, very technical few number of people. How do we start to solve for that, to close that gap, if you will? So that's my personal journey to crypto and what attracted me to working squarely at the intersection of social impact and cryptocurrencies and digital assets.
Cool. And I think I asked you this, but have you heard of, oh, sorry, his name's escaping my mind. He's like a Nobel Peace Prize winner who invented
Yunus.
Yeah, Muhammad Yunus,
Muhammad
right,
Yunus,
from
yeah.
Bangladesh. Have you read his work or seen him?
I have.
Or you have?
I
Okay,
have.
interesting. So what is to set the framework, maybe, because I think a lot of people, at least that I know, don't really know about what the idea of a social business. It sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, but it's almost like, to me, it's very eye-opening when I learned about how you can essentially, where your bottom line is not the dollar, your bottom line is social impact. And then obviously there's got to be some model around it. But I found that to be very counterintuitive to the way the world works today. But what is a social business? When you talk about impact, like what does that really mean? And how do you quantify that or whatever?
Sure. So we'll talk about two different branches of it, and by no means is this exclusive or comprehensive. The first model would be, let's say, ESG businesses, which are publicly traded companies that are listed on stock exchanges that are evaluated based off of their ESG rating. What is ESG rating? It refers to environmental, social, and governance. And so it's actually an assessment that's done on large public companies that's basically focused off of how are you triangulating or responding to these three different elements, whether it's environmental degradation and what you're doing about climate change and how you're investing in a clean energy strategy, whether it's social in terms of focusing on particularly underserved populations, maybe it's regarding your pricing in those areas, et cetera, or governance in terms of who are the people who actually have a seat at the table in defining what the business strategy is and who makes the decisions. That's getting a lot of attention now in terms of strategic diversity and inclusion initiatives in hiring, particularly at the board level, at the executive level in these big public companies. ESG ratings, again, they refer to companies that are, for the most part, very large established companies where investors can put their money, where they know that they're going to a company that has made strategic, serious investments in making impact in one way or another a key part of their business strategy. That's when we talk about social investing, that's one big portion of it. The other portion of it, I would say, is more focused off of, let's talk about Muhammad Yunus and the Grameen Bank, which is actually thinking about how can we innovate in terms of our business model or our go-to-market strategy in a way that achieves a double bottom line return. When we say double bottom line return, what do we mean? That we're making money. Okay, so it's not a charity, it's not a donation-based business. A profit is expected, a return is expected. And secondarily, that it has some sort of social benefit, okay? In the case, a social benefit, again, is an anecdotal term, right? But what I can say is that you can believe it when you see it in terms of employing people who are using the funds to pull themselves and their families out of poverty, whether it's a health business that's focused off of affordable models for glasses and eye surgeries to help people improve their vision, whether it's a water company that's focused off of an innovative business model that leverages local employees to help clean the water supply, et cetera. There's lots of different creative examples and many examples out there. But one of the most famous ones is what Yunus did with building Grameen-Bank, where he basically took the use case of lending, which is based off of how do you lend to people who have no collateral? When you and I want to go and get a loan in a bank, what do? We go ahead and we list all of our assets. We list our income. We list maybe someone who's willing to vouch for us, whether it's a parent or a spouse or a business partner, someone who has assets that's on the hook for the loan that I'm taking. So the question is asked, how do you give a loan to someone when they don't have a house, when they don't have a traditional bank account, when they don't necessarily have, for all lack of a politically correct term, they're poor people, right? They have nothing that you or I understand to be of wealth, of value, that would justify writing them a check and expecting to get paid back and with interest. And so one of the things that Muhammad Yunus did with Grameen-Bank was he actually innovated from the bottom up, which was instead of looking at, let's say, traditional assets that we have conventionally thought of in terms of real estate or liquid assets, etc. He actually looked at the social assets of the networks and the communities of where these people operated in. That was that for people who are operating with very little, they're collaborating a lot to get food, get healthcare, get water, etc. They're working as a village in order to meet those needs. And so the idea was, how can we leverage the social structure in a way that allows people to receive the money that they need, whether it's to start a business or pay school fees or medical emergency or whatnot. And so one of the Grameen-Bank is based off of is a social business. Why? Because it grants loans to people who don't have traditional assets. They do it via a version where a model where everyone in the community is on the hook for the loan. Okay, so one person is given the loan, but it's collateralized by the group. And so the idea here is actually that there's a certain level, a social layer and commitment to encourage people to pay back the loan in time with the interest, because if the first person who receives the loan doesn't pay it back, it actually marks or basically punishes the credit score of the entire community. And so at first this was considered to be a really crazy idea until it was launched. And I think the Grameen-Bank now, 30 years later, has one of the highest loan repayment rates of almost any bank out there. It's something like a 99% repayment rate. One of the tricks was in terms of he was focusing on lending to women, which
I was gonna say, I thought that was the reason they had such a high payback rate in return.
It's both.
I didn't hear the first part. The first part is fascinating. Okay. Wow, that gives me a lot of okay, continue.
So the idea here is actually, like I said, there's not necessarily a strict definition of what is or isn't a social business, right?
Got it.
It's more you know it when you see it. So when in the example of the Grameen-Bank, where you see these women who otherwise would have had no way to start a micro business or buy the yarn that was used to create the weaving business or to pay for the kids to go to school so that they can go out and get the right jobs and lift the family out of poverty. It's these types of examples where Grameen-Bank was making money and you're making real impactful change on people who are currently really underserved by the existing conventional systems.
Okay. And but by the way, in terms of your kind of backstory, though, I loved how you drew in like public transport, because that's something that you're right. Maybe not everyone even really takes part in, but if you do, you're part of the public and you get to interact with everyone out there and get to see the world in a different way. One other thing I wanted to mention is oftentimes when we think about poverty or people without assets, we think of the other side of the world. But recently I've been watching this YouTube channel about homeless people in North America. And it's pretty striking, but in places like San Francisco, it's really out of hand. And there are a lot of people that I watch these videos because it's so touching, because it'll be like, oh, I have a master's in mathematics and a PhD and they're living on the street for a lot of the reasons that you're talking about. Just the system is broken. Like one lady, like the lady I'm referring to, she had a house that burned down in a fire. And now she's homeless.
It happens. I will say that when we talk about financial inclusion and financial education, I think you're right. A lot of our mentally, we immediately go to the other side of the world. We start to think about Southeast Asia, we think about the African countries, all these places. But the reality is that the number of underbanked people in the world is, I think, upwards of 5.5 billion. Okay. This isn't
pretty
just
much
people
everyone
in those countries. That includes everyone,
That's
right?
pretty much
That means
everyone.
exactly. Exactly. So I'm going to forget the statistics right now. I think even within New York City, it's 30% of residents within the South Bronx don't have a bank account. Okay. That's what people living in New York City.
Think about that.
And so then you begin to realize, it's fascinating to start to think about also, not only is there so much potential, so much, let's say, latent potential in that population in terms of the human potential, economic potential, all of it, cultural potential, but also you start to realize that there's a lot of informal money flows, a lot of informal money flows that aren't actually captured by our conventional system. So that's something that I think should make every free market believer in the room interested.
And the reason I think it's important to make these connections is because I think it's really easy to check out when you start talking about these types of problems, because it's nothing to do with me. But I think it's important to recognize that it might not be, but it could be. Maybe, who knows, 10 years down the road, something bad happens. And I don't know. I think it's important thinking about how do you help like everyone. Another, I think, mega, aside from, let's just leave COVID and the pandemic aside, the fact that's forced so many people out of being able to work, whether another kind of larger mega thing that I read a lot about and think about is AI, right? Is like cars literally drive themselves. Forget all the other use cases. Just cars alone driving themselves replaces a lot of people's jobs. And we're going to just tell those people, hey, just learn to program. And even that, I would argue, is going to be figured out very soon with things like OpenAI and all that. So I don't know. I do think it's like, again, not taking money from certain people and using force and giving it to others. But I think this problem set of, look, like if you're some child, you have no parents, you're like left on the street, like you should have some mechanism by which you can at least feed yourself, or you can just log in and get your $1 or $5 a day. So anyway, so from there, and I wanted to make sure your story wise, did we cover, enough ground there in terms of what you, like I said, sometimes like I have no time limit on it, but was there anything else you wanted to share in terms of like your growing up? So it sounded like you grew up in New York. Were you much into tech, or was tech more like a foreign thing for you? Or you more, I don't know, into like clubs and stuff, or like social
I was more
clubs?
into the clubs. I was more into the
bars. I was going to say social clubs in school, but okay, bars. New York's got a good bar scene.
That was more fun. No, let's see. Actually, it's funny. I grew up in a really creative community. So tech and business was not part of my worldview until actually I was in my 20s. My mom was a chef. My dad was an artist. All of their friends were working in creative fields. I actually learned a lot. I learned about philanthropy from my grandfather. It was really a critical part of his life to think that how we were always giving back to others and making sure that we were aware of how fortunate we were, and that whatever good fortune we have, we should also share with others. And so I would say that was what got me really truly interested in working in the impact space. But I was not raised by a developer or a businessman or anything like that. That was something I came to much later in life as an individual.
I think you said chef and artist?
And
artist. Interesting. I think if you think about it, in a world where things do get more highly automated, I could picture where chefs and artists are probably all we're left with because they're so core to, I think, human nature. But I also think on the flip side, with technology, we're like artists and chefs in some way, right? Like whether it's like the Bitcoin like code base or whatever, it's like we're cooking up something here. It's just not food.
Totally. Absolutely. I was going to say that's what I think has the art of creation and the art of innovation and being willing to create something that might be good, might be bad, people might like, people might not like, and still put it out there into the world. The willingness to really, I want to say, like, work on the edge of things that people say, or like, oh, that's crazy, you'll never do it, like, good luck. I think there's a boldness and a bravery in putting yourself out there and working on challenging problems and knowing that people might look down at you for it or not take you seriously. And I think a lot of that bravery and the willingness to take criticism, the willingness to hear the word no, a lot of that I attribute to seeing my dad and his resilience in his own career and just continuing to go ahead and make the work and put beautiful things out there into the world. So it's very much impacted my approach to work, even though it didn't influence my journey into technology.
Yeah. And in terms of, okay, and then in terms of, so you said you grew up in New York, very amazing place and everything. How did you just segue into the good dollar conversation then? When was the first time you learned about Bitcoin? Was that in
I was late, 2017.
Okay. And so I guess did you came to Good Dollar not through the whole kind of Bitcoin regular way? You came more through the social impact side, and I guess having
I came through Bancor. So I came from working on a protocol on Ethereum. Core protocol was one of the original automated market maker protocols that was out there that was focusing on the liquidity of the long tail of tokens, right? Small market cap tokens, how you make sure that there's always liquidity for small market cap tokens. Obviously, as a core part of that, there's a lot of social impact use cases, right? Whether it's focused off of community currencies or creator coins or a number of different social projects that are now coming out. So anyway, this was all very much in my worldview when I was starting to learn about crypto and the potential for blockchain technologies to be used to address a range of problems. And Good Dollar is focused off of one problem, but that was my introduction.
And then what does that look like then? What was it about the Good Dollar project initially that really caught your interest, and how did you, I don't know, like what does that story look like? And really curious to dig into the Good Dollar project now and share with people what it's about, maybe a bit under the hood and what the goals are and all that.
Sure. One of the problems that I saw when I was working at Bancor, we were working really starting to build DeFi, starting to build decentralized finance. And one of the things that I quickly became aware of was who's accessing and who's benefiting from these products and solutions. And I was attracted to work in blockchain and crypto because I was attracted to the financial inclusion use case. But I saw what was actually happening on Ethereum, and in many cases it was for the most elite group of people who were using these technologies to actually create a huge amount of wealth and enrich themselves, which is an amazing use case, but doesn't actually solve for the problem of financial inclusion. And so one of the things I was really attracted to when I was talking to Yoni about Good Dollar was the mission that how do we actually solve for this problem of, we know inequality is a problem at large in our society, but also it's a problem within our own niche industry of cryptocurrencies, right? Where at that point, I think 9% of the Bitcoin wallets held 95% of the supply or something like that. So we start to see the same patterns of inequality recreating themselves in this new economy that's supposed to be so much better than the old economy that we're leaving behind. So that was the challenge and the problem that really attracted me to come and work on the Good Dollar project. Now, what are we actually trying to do at Good Dollar? We're trying to actually solve for this inequality of wealth distribution, but not through a tax-based model, but rather through a free market model. So you mentioned when you talk to a lot of people about universal basic income, or the idea of universal basic income is that irregardless of who you are and whether you're working or what your age status, et cetera, is, you'll be given an equal distribution to your peers of money. Okay, you'll be given money, right? There are a number of reasons you actually referenced in your introduction, reasons why this is relevant now and even more urgent. Automation is one cause. The fact that workforce is being transformed and what will be required of people is another, but also just the lack of security that people have. So I think the fragility of society, if one thing that COVID has shown us, it's that it's a really thin thread that holds it all together. And it can be completely and totally arbitrary in terms of what side of the thread you fall on. This idea of universal basic income, which is, let's give everyone some assurance that they have something. Let's give everyone some certainty that whether they're getting $300 a month or $1,000 a month, which was what a popular proposal in the 2020 US election by the candidate Andrew Yang, that people have something to stand on. Now, one of the problems with that is that Government distrust is at an all-time high. Efficient, and I think this is particularly true amongst Bitcoiners, right? In addition to the, yeah. So
No,
in
I'm sorry.
addition,
I'm sorry. I gotta interrupt. I'm laughing because yesterday I was at the grocery store and there was a kid like on the other side, and he was literally like, I was asking him, "Oh, you take Visa? You take Amex?" He's like, "You take anything under the sun." I'm like, "You take Bitcoin?" And he looked at me, he's, dude, if they took Bitcoin here, I'd be shopping here all the time. This is what the kid says to me. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is like this new generation, they already know. They know what's
they
up.
know.
They know. I have USDC, I have this, that. He's like, the reason that the price went down last week was because the Chinese miners and da da da. I was like, okay, I think my job is done. Like I can just, go somewhere and not
Just wait for the rest of
like
the
who am I
kids to grow up.
educating? Yeah,
No, but
exactly.
it's funny because I'm a millennial, you're a millennial, right? We're
Yeah,
like
yeah.
very much at the crux in the awkward moment between the old world that we grew
Yeah.
up in and the new world that we're still attuned enough to pay attention that it's
Yeah.
happening. And
Yeah.
we're seeing it happen, even though we're not in all the TikTok channels and we're not in all the
Yeah,
conversations and we don't know the
we've gone to
slang.
TikTok enough just to know.
We know the groundswell is coming,
Yeah,
right? We
yeah,
know
yeah,
the
yeah.
flashpoint is coming. Yeah, you talk to younger people in terms of what do you do? Who would you trust more, like government or a decentralized internet community? For them, there's no question. There's so little faith in institutions. There's so little faith in governments. I think that's one of the reasons why when you ask Bitcoiners or many people, like, what do you think of universal basic income? It comes from an inherent distrust of the state and institutions and a disbelief in the tax code and a disbelief that the tax code can be better reformed and that the government will actually distribute the money efficiently. There's so many ways for it to break up and down the chain. I'm not that surprised that a lot of people, when they first hear about universal basic income, they are turned off because they're turned off by government.
It's real. And in my defense, also, I'd say that having parents from Calcutta and having like visited Calcutta, quite possibly one of the poorest places on earth, and then living in Canada and seeing that juxtaposition growing up, it was pretty obvious to me that something isn't working. Like, meaning there's a lot of people that can barely survive from day to day. And so I think if you're on the other side of that coin, it's worth at least thinking about it.
I remember when I was a young person, I remember hearing that there's actually enough food that's produced in the world so that to feed every person on the planet. I was like, but there's so many people that are going hungry, that are suffering from malnutrition. How is it that there's enough food, but it's not meeting the market? I thought the market was supposed to be efficient. I thought it was supposed to allocate the resources to the people that need it. And I actually think that's a really relevant analogy for thinking about an open universal basic income system, which is that there's actually enough capital and enough money out there to provide every single person on the planet with something to get started with. So if we're going to be playing in the, let's say, if we're going to be playing in the free market, if we're going to be playing the monopoly game, one of the things about monopoly is everyone starts off at the same level, right? That's not true of our modern economy. And that's not even true. That's certainly not true between countries. And it's not true within countries, that everyone starts on an equal playing field. Now, when I say that, it's not that everyone should have the same. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
But that it's based off of the idea that everyone deserves an opportunity to create an opportunity. Everyone deserves an opportunity to take the class, to learn the skill, to start the company, to initiate the business. Exactly. Rather than or to eat.
Yeah, exactly. To eat, like
Without
straight
fear.
up, or like a shelter over your head. You'd be surprised how, again, like I listen to these homeless people and it just breaks my heart because they're just like super qualified, but they're like, look, I don't have a home to go clean up in and then show up for an interview. I don't have a car to drive. It's like basic things. Okay, continue, I guess. What's next?
So the idea of what's an open UBI? What's a free market universal basic income, which is really the foundational idea behind Good Dollar, which is how can we leverage and incentivize all of the capital that's out there to create money that goes to everyone where there's a win-win. Okay. So the mission of Good Dollar is actually, when we look at the space of digital assets, when we look at the space of cryptocurrencies, It's actually about how can we make sure that every person that has a smartphone, every person that's connected to the knowledge economy, right, that's connected to the internet, has a way to begin to learn about digital assets and cryptocurrencies, begin to access them, and begin to collect them without having to put money on the table. So without having to invest, without having to bet on Team Bitcoin or bet on Team Ethereum or whatever you're talking about, right? Because most people just, this is a crypto podcast. We all know onboarding into crypto is a challenge, no matter what your level of financial education is, no matter how well banked you are, we all know it's a challenge, right? So the idea is actually, how can we solve that onboarding problem by lowering the barriers to entry? And how can we do it via giving away a digital currency that has real value, which is part of what we'll talk about? And importantly, how are we creating a sustainable loop where this system is always being funded and is able to scale, right? And this is one of the most interesting things that I think we've done at Good Dollar, which is that we've taken these same principles of impact investing. How do you get a double bottom line return that gives the financial investor a financial benefit while knowing they're doing social good? And we've taken those ideas and we've thought, how can we apply this to a crypto model? How can we apply this to a crypto model where the goal is to forever generate a digital universal basic income that's sustaining? And that's the economic model that we've built with our brilliant product and token architect, Tomer Bariach, here at Good Dollar, is focused off of.
I know Tomer. He's awesome.
You know Tomer?
Yeah.
Oh, great. That makes it even better. I love that. So,
he's such a good character.
Yeah, and Tomer built this model, which is based off of the idea of actually like a traditional endowment model. So how can we encourage people to lock and save their money in a fund where they basically interest is generated, right? Now, what happens to that interest? Part of that interest goes to fund the free currency stream that's given out to people. And a portion of that interest goes back to the financial sponsors, right? You're making a better return on your capital than you would get through putting it in a bank. We all know that the interest rates in banks are abysmal. We know that you can get a better yield through using different staking or savings and loan services on the blockchain. And we believe that humans are fundamentally good, and that a lot of the people that got rich in crypto, a lot of the people who've made a lot of money, okay, will have an inherent interest in giving back and sharing that wealth with more people. Okay. And so the idea is actually, how can we encourage those people so that instead of chasing, let's say, the 20% APY and some crazy DeFi protocol, the hottest one, et cetera, or actually they're saying, you know what, I'm willing to accept the 8%. I'm willing to accept the 7% return. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stake my money into a fund where I know that portion of that is going to give real currency, real digital currency to people who really need it. And while making a return and earning a return in a token that also is moving up and to the right as well.
Okay, so my first question, okay, so this is pretty interesting. And by the way, like the AMM thing is actually not just a thing anymore. Everyone knows what's up. Everyone knows about what's going on here in the Bitcoin scene, Ethereum scene. And so I think that model, okay, so okay, I'm going to step back a little bit. So I talked about how and again, I spent 10 years in robotics. My wife's a mechatronics engineer. So I'm not like, I do know a little bit about this stuff. So I do think that this idea of building some mechanism by which like automation and all of this can serve and not just be owned by, let's say, a handful of people like the Elon Musk of the world, but like by a lot of people, and in a way where some of the benefits of the, let's say, the automation are, and like the revenue or whatever that's generated from these robots and online automated ways of making money. What if a portion of that was my kind of initial thought, would be to think, what if we could somehow funnel that back into a UB type thing? And it sounds like that's what, or at least the first version of it seems like that's what you guys were building, right?
Fully, absolutely. The idea is that Good Dollar, what are we trying to do? We're actually trying to reduce the amount of friction that it takes for a company or an individual to do good with their money and feed this system, right? One way is like reducing the friction in terms of you don't have to donate the money, you don't have to give the money away, you can still make money off of it. The second part is a system that serves anyone and where you actually have a really strong pitch to the companies that are putting people out of business or taking jobs away from people. So I think part of it is creating a system where you can actually go to, I don't want to name particular companies that are going to say wipe out the truck driver business. And you can say for an approximate, you're going to make, I don't know, $1 trillion off of this innovation. But as a result of this, 300,000 people are going to lose their jobs. And there's actually a differential here in terms of the amount of funds of your $1 trillion that will compensate for those 300,000 people. And if you put, let's say, $1 billion into this mechanism, you'll be able to pay out, let's say, $100 a month, potentially $200 a month, maybe even more, to this population of people that are, let's say, on the losing side of that equation. And so I actually think, when I really look to the future, we talked about that ESG standard for publicly traded companies, right? Which is the standard that shows you a metric of evaluating how well a company is doing. I think we're actually going to start to see similar type pressures come for companies to answer to similar type issues about the changing workforce and the amount of money that they're putting into funding an automated money creation and distribution system to compensate and make up for lost jobs as a result of automation and profits they're taking.
And this is not a weird topic, right? Like you mentioned, I think Andrew Yang literally ran on this platform. I think you guys like Jack Dorsey, and there's so many people, like whether it's, I think even Bill, a lot of these like kind of tech entrepreneurs have been talking about the need for something like this. And again, I do also acknowledge that UBI can go into a very dark place as well, as in, don't you believe people should work to live and blah, 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 and all this. And I think what we're talking about here, just like some sort of like life jacket, like we're talking about not making maybe everyone like mansions for everyone, but we're talking about giving people the ability to. The best example I think of is, do you remember Bitcoin faucets?
Yeah,
you probably don't, or maybe you do. But
no,
way back in the day,
because you discussed it with me and I loved it. And
they were
like
they were such a dream. But it was, I think it stopped. I think my guess is because people probably were like, oh, I'm never giving away this thing. But it's probably more so because it got expensive to do. Like it got expensive to give away small amounts of Bitcoin. But now with Lightning and other things, I think it could make a comeback. But I thought that was a beautiful thing, because adoption, whether you're talking about the Good Dollar project or let's say some crypto exchange or some new company, at the end of the day, adoption is going to be part of that narrative. And so why not think about like essentially that's what we're talking about, right? Like a way to get where anybody can just log into a website and get $1 of $5, $10, and then do what they need to do with it. And so from what I did read the white paper, I think, and maybe in full, maybe not, but I think it was essentially, from what I gathered, is it built on top of an ERC20 token?
Yeah, $Dollars in the ERC20
does that mean
token.
It's subject to the fees as well?
No, because we're operating on a side chain from Ethereum. So
brilliant.
Yeah,
there you go. Okay. Okay. So
so I'll tell you a little bit about what we've done, because we've actually launched a POC that has some really cool results.
Talk to me.
And this is making me really excited for the summer, which is when we're going to open the protocol to everyone who wants to participate. But I'll tell you a little bit about the Good Dollar experience. So Good Dollar, like you said, it's a really simple app, right? You create an account. You don't go through a traditional KYC process. You just have to have a unique face, right? And you can sign up using your Facebook account or your Google account. It's designed for people who are non-technical, who don't have blockchain wallets, who don't have crypto. And once you get there, you basically see a button where you claim every day your free daily digital currency. Now, the question is, where does the money come from? And so that's a little bit about the economic model, the impact investing model that I shared before. And in our POC, what have we done? We actually took a stake, a certain amount of capital, $60,000 from eToro that was generously donated for us to run this POC on. And we staked it into a compound contract. Based off of the interest that was generated there, we basically, over the past few months, have distributed over $6,000 that was autonomously generated based off of a principle that was not drawn down on. And $6,000 was given away to people. We have nearly 250,000 users on the system, members in the system from over 180 countries. Okay, probably 80,000 of them are coming back to the wallet every day to claim their free GoodDollar's, which is an ERC20 token. I think you'll find this interesting, Sonny. 100,000 of them are coming from Southeast Asia, which I find fascinating, but also throughout Africa, we have a high concentration in Nigeria and also all throughout Latin America. And what we're starting to see is a system that's actually able to give out $200 of free crypto every single day to those people. And so as an individual user, let's say they're receiving cents on the dollar, but we start to really understand first of all, there's a need for it, right? People are hungry for this. People are hungry for this no matter what the cost is, and they're hungry for it in the places where they have the populations that need this, right? We also start to see that smart contracts can be used to autonomously, without any human intervention, create and distribute free money to people in a sustainable way. And so this POC makes me really excited because based off of these numbers, we begin to understand the potential of a system like this. And so GoodDollar right now is essentially a closed system where we have $58,000 staked in one contract. It's really hard to participate. It's hard to interact with the contracts. There's no UX, there's no UI, all the impact investment side of it hasn't been built yet. If you want to financially sponsor the GoodDollar project, it's really hard. However, when we launch this summer, the protocol will be open, and we're starting to do these projections that allow us to dream, right? Like, how do we serve 1 million people with $200,000 a day? And it's actually numbers that are achievable within the first year or the second year. We're talking about, I think the $GoodDollar market cap right now is a little over $100,000. If we are able to put in, basically, it's a $100 million market cap token, it will do that. It will actually sustainably give $200,000 a day to 1 million people. And that's amazing. That's amazing. Ooh.
You know how all these companies have just money like sitting in the bank?
Yeah.
So this could, imagine if there's like some sort of time lock or whatever, where they knew programmatically they would get back their capital. It's just sitting in a bank anyways, probably paying negative interest rates. What if they could just lock their capital into this AMM, like, well, whatever, this GoodDollar infrastructure? And now, like you said, those 300,000 people you just laid off because of robots, you cryptographically somehow show that they're going to be okay. And then the rest of it goes to everyone. I don't know, but it sounds interesting. Yeah.
You start to understand that you're actually, one of the things that I've started to see and understand is that we're actually not, we're a lot closer to making a bigger impact than I had originally thought, which is that, and this is just because there's so much money in crypto right now. Like the market cap of crypto has gotten to be so big so quickly. I think bigger than any of us had imagined would happen over the past year. And so I think for me, I see at one point $100 million market cap token. That's crazy. At one point, I would have said that. It'll take us years to achieve that. Actually, there's $60 billion staked in DeFi today. So actually not that far off to start to think of, what if we just take 10% of that capital? What if we take 20% of that capital? What if we start, each person in their own portfolio takes 10% and starts to direct it towards something that's, you're not even donating your money, you're just staking it towards a cause.
And what if platforms like DeFi platforms, let's say blockchains, could somehow signal programmatically, but maybe a logo on their site as well, but programmatically could signal to the world that whatever certain percentage of their foundations, whatever, is going towards GoodDollar because they see this as a problem. And this is why I think people should, again, I've already probably said this 5 times, but this is another major reason people should care, is that like the Bitcoin ethos kind of challenges the very notion of money. We could argue with that, but that's what it's going for. And underlying that is saying that, look, maybe there are models that we've inherited that don't work anymore. The reason that governments, in my view, at least, they exist because they take care of people, right? And how they maybe exist is perhaps not morally the way we, like for me, at least, using guns and forcing people, but they take care of people. They take care of either us when we need them or others, our neighbors. And so I think as Bitcoiners, if we're going to be so bold as to challenge the very monetary foundation, we shouldn't just be like, oh, I've got my citadels and we're good. It should also be about like, how do we serve? How do we give back? How do we make sure that others in the world are also okay? And we give back in a way that's, like I said, that's transparent, open source, ideally. Okay, sorry, I'm going on because I'm so excited about this
but I
project,
love it
but go on.
Sonny, I think you're tapping into something really real and really important for that I think we as a community have to tap into in order for projects like Good Dollar to succeed, which is that we need to have empathy for other people, and we need to not lose sight of that. It was actually you who a few months said to me that remember the original Bitcoin ethos of come for the Lambo, stay for the revolution. And I think about that a lot when you said that to me, which is that what is the revolution? What is it? And I think revolution now, okay, it's an evolution, not a revolution. Okay, whatever the point is, what is the purpose that we came for? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? And I think every person, like you said, part of their journey is being drawn to the narrative of Bitcoin and this challenging of what money is, how it's distributed, who controls it, who it goes to, and therefore who it's benefiting. And I think we as a community need to take a hard look at ourselves, if you will, and think about what are we doing to actually advance that mission and not just recreate the same patterns in this new digital money system that we did in the old digital money system. And thinking, and that requires thinking differently about personal responsibility, thinking different about personal social responsibility. I think that every person, crypto changed my life. I know a lot of people who crypto changed their life, right? Each of us have a social obligation as part of the social contract that we benefited from to share and extend that mission with others and use some of the capital that we've acquired on this ride to deploy it for good. And I think that's a critical part of the story. And it's a story that's not being told enough, especially in the past few months, as everyone's just been so blown away with the all-time highs and all of that.
Yeah. Totally. This project definitely touches close to home. I think it's something that I've been following. And like I said, if you look at, by the way, I think this might be like episode 99 or 100. So quite fitting. But my final question for almost everyone has been, what are your thoughts on UBI, on universal basic income? And then I follow that question up after they say whatever they say. I'd say, have you heard of Good Dollar? So I'm really happy that Yanni's bringing on people like you on board to see this through, because I don't think this is something that we should take lightly and just, oh, well,
it's not
nice.
trivial.
Let someone else figure it out.
It's not trivial. We're onto something that's real.
Hey, I lost your audio. It might be me. 1 second. Can you say something? Let me pause it here. Okay, you're back. We're good. Sorry. Okay. But yeah, it's not trivial. You're right.
It's not trivial. And I think one of the things is that it's actually possible and achievable. We have the technology. We actually have the capital. The money is out there to pay for systems like this. And I think actually really importantly now, what we're getting the groundswell for is that we're starting to get the culture, right? Which is that I think we're actually at a critical inflection point in terms of people realizing, retail investors waking up. We see massive mobilization of digital communities on the internet. We see people really paying attention to the power of Bitcoin and falling in love with the Bitcoin ethos. And I think even though many people, Bitcoin's on its own journey now, but I think Good Dollar is another example of a technology and a community that's designed for the people and designed to empower people and is designed to be governed by its members and its owners. And that's why Good Dollar is built as an open source protocol. That's why it's not structured as a nonprofit, right? Is that this is designed to be a digital public utility that people can embrace and run with to serve the greater good.
Lovely. Cool. So I love this. Was there anything else you wanted to share? I know we could probably do a couple episodes on just Good Dollar alone. And if you want from your team or whatever, it's like people that want to take different kind of takes at it or whatever, more technical, less technical, we can do that. But yeah, anything else you want to cover for this episode in terms of Good Dollar? I know we covered a lot of ground.
I'm good in terms of my topics. I know you've got a lot of listeners though, so I will make, let's say, 2 calls out to the people that are listening here today who have made it this far in the episode. So the first would be, we're looking for partners. So if you're focusing on, if this episode touches you at all, if you relate to this, if you relate to the work that we're doing, no matter what type of business you're running, whether it's a blockchain business, an exchange business, a tokenized app business, we're looking for partners. So please reach out to me. I'm really easy to find. And second of all, I'm always looking for other like-minded individuals who want to help tell our story. Those are my 2 pleas, is that if you relate to what I've said here today and what we've talked about on this podcast today, please reach out, because it's not going to be done by our project alone. It's going to be done by every other individual who's active in this community, embracing this ethos, believing in it, and putting their money where their mouth is and joining the cause. So that's where that's my last plea.
Yeah, that's very cool. Hey, I wasn't going to let you off that easy. But it's good that we covered, I think, most of the good dollar stuff. There was a few more questions that I wanted to quickly ask you. One being, what is one thing that you believe to be true that most others in Bitcoin, or let's say crypto, would disagree with you on? And it might be just maybe a summary of what we've already talked about in today's episode, or it might be something else. But is there any one thing that you believe to be true that most others in Bitcoin or crypto would disagree with you on?
I think have fun staying poor is the most despicable statement in the world.
Thank you. Someone had to say it.
That's what I think. Well, it's a popular statement in the crypto community. I think it's just the most despicable lack of empathy coming from a place of privilege saying I've ever seen. I hope I never hear it or read it again, and I don't think I'll be so lucky.
Lovely. Okay. And I guess we did touch on my last 2 questions I asked, kind of, sort of, but do you think AI is, just from wherever you've seen it, do you think it is something that is an existential threat, or do you think that's irrelevant, meaning because of the pandemic and other things that it's almost like we need to figure this out, whether it's AI is a threat or not? Do you see job replacement and the guy, for example, I think doctors, this might be a little bit like heretic to say, but I think doctors are more replaceable than nurses, for example, in the AI future that I see.
In diagnosis, right?
Yeah. Like I think I'll have an app that gives me some sort of what the doctor does for me versus what a nurse does, which is like that the human element to it, I think is much harder to replace. But do you think that, or do you think it's all overblown and I'm watching too many sci-fi movies?
I don't know if it's all overblown. I will say I think COVID has actually really accelerated the rate of digitalization in a range of ways that we couldn't have predicted. And it makes me wonder if there are going to be other, let's say, flashpoints that we can't anticipate that are going to accelerate it even further. I think AI, every technology, it's neither inherently good or bad. It's all about how we as a human organization embrace it and how we respond to it. And so maybe doctors being replaced by more accurate, bias-free algorithms will be a good thing if it yields better results, and if those people are also given a better pathway for how they're going to use their skills and their future, etc. So I think it's actually, the challenge isn't the fear of AI. What the thing to be afraid of is actually the challenges that we have as a society and a culture, and looking more than 1 inch in front of our face. So are we actually looking far enough forward into the future where we can begin to plan for massive disruptions, right? Whether they're coming in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 50 years. And I would argue to say that we have lots of reasons to believe that we're only dealing with the immediate crisis right now, and we're having challenges as a civilization doing strategic planning for the long term. So that's my read on it. It's like a challenge of human organization and shared vision and conviction for what our future will be and what type of society we want to build, and whether we want to take care of those doctors or whether we want to say, good luck, go to some other job training.
Yeah. And I think I was mentioning to you last time as well that I interviewed Connie from BitGive. I don't know if you have a connect with her, but I'd love to make the connection. But I do think there's not a lot of people doing this type of work, which is like more like socially aimed. I don't know, having more people connected on this front is always helpful. Before, the last question, and the kind of whole episode was this, but I want to just ask it just because. What is your thought on universal basic income? Just to sum up the whole talk today.
It's great. First of all, I'm a proponent and a believer that everyone should have the opportunity to have an opportunity, right? This is something that I'm a major proponent of. Now, I think that the best way, the fastest way with the least amount of barriers will actually be through an open universal basic income system like Good Dollar. Why? Just because we as technologists and innovators and social innovators can move so much faster than the government can. We don't have to worry about replacing, like I said, an entire welfare system, social system, tax code, etc. So I'm actually really optimistic. I've never been more optimistic for open UBI having a place to really run and grow and hit our society at the right moment in time. I also think, just in terms of the political moment, we're also going to see an embrace of more UBI-like cash policies. And I think this is a direct result of the pandemic and cash policies that, regardless of what it's done for the money supply or for inflation or for the price of Bitcoin, doesn't really matter. But we saw with the CARES Act and the subsequent COVID relief acts in the States, at least, that giving money to people helps prevent crisis in a way that was unpopular to talk about before. And I think we see that now with the Biden passing the child tax care credit, and which actually automatically gives cash to people that families that have children. So I think we're actually going to see it happen on both ends. I think we're going to see, in terms of the government, cash relief, cash aid globally is going to become a more popular policy, especially within capitalist societies where people are taking that cash and using it to stimulate the economy. And we're going to start to see, we're not the only crypto UBI project out there. There's around 30 out there. I think we're going to start to see other models begin to emerge that provide people with some baseline economic assets, baseline economic security coming from the free market innovation side as well.
And I know, what does it, like, let's say next year we talk again, right? Around this time, what does a win look like for you guys in terms of, you said, I don't know, 100K type of deal, AUM. I think you said 250,000 users, but like, what would look like a win for you guys?
A year from now, I would, first of all, love to have at least 1 million members of the community. And I would love to see up to $100 million of crypto staked in Good Dollar coming from the same people that are staking around on Compound, Aave, Yearn, etc. So I would love to see all of these people that have really, let's say, are Ethereum whales. There's many of them out there that have really made a lot of money in DeFi operating on Ethereum, but also the Bitcoiners start to take a fraction of their wealth and not donate it outright, but begin to direct it programmatically to a cause like ours. And
Cool.
so that's really my goal, is a million people, a million members on the blockchain. I would love to see us with $100 million staked in the Good Dollar contract, which will just make that reality of getting to the $200,000 a day for 1 million people that much closer.
So we're talking sorry. I was trying to do some quick math there. Probably shouldn't have tried. But anyways, we'll leave the math to others to figure out. But okay,
we'll leave the math to Tomer. You'll have him come back and do math on the fly.
Tomer, yeah. Oh, I'd love to have him. Him. Okay, this has been fascinating. Like I said, I feel like I could do a couple hours here just asking a million questions. But I think we covered the first pass of general questions that at least I had, and I'm sure many others listening to this for the first time might have. Where do people find out about the project? Where do people find out about you? What's the website and all that?
Sure. So for the project, gooddollar.org, and you can find us on Twitter and Instagram and all that social stuff at gooddollar.org. Those are our channels there. You can find me pretty easily on LinkedIn, on Google, on my website. Also on Twitter, I'm at The Real Stone. So I'm pretty easily findable as well. And this has been really fun, Sonny. Thanks so much.
Lovely. Okay, and I'm going to bring this to an end, but just stick around for a few seconds.